friends. Welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. I'm Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with Deacon of Dick Jokes, Chris Prunty, as well as continued special guest, Daniel Quinn. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Fantastic.
Great. On today's episode, we are blessed, #blessed, to be joined by Jim Davis from the YouTube channel WebDM. If you haven't seen their series or their channel in general, you really should. I mean, not just if you're interested in like D&D 5e or D&D or RPGs in general, but if you ever really want to sit down and listen to two guys talk about very intricate details of different types of fantastical races or different aspects of fantasy worlds, that is one of the best places to do it. So we're going to go ahead and cut straight to the interview now, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, hello. We are here and honored to be with Jim Davis of WebDM, among many other accolades. But Jim, why don't you go ahead and start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a full-time YouTuber, which is a weird place to be in. But mostly I'm someone who's like all my life have had this this hobby, Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, that I've used as a way to make sure my friends have an excuse to hang out, that we've got time off of work that we can say is, no, it's a thing, it's scheduled, it's not just a hangout, and found that, my desire to deliver a fun and engaging game experience for my friends turned into a head full of useful advice for others. And I happen to know some friends who had video camera, and we all just, I don't know, I guess I'm a natural, like, for a camera or a mirror or something, and I'll just, I light up, and I like the performance part of it, and so I took to it really well. And lo and behold, we had something to say that role players out there and D&D players out there were really connecting with, and we just happened by pure luck to start right around the time that, say, Critical Role was getting really big and 5th edition was coming out, and so we rode this wave of popularity that it's just like completely changed all of our lives. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's I guess that's me in a nutshell. Snapshot in 2020.
That's a pretty good snapshot to look at, actually. That's not bad.
Yeah.
And it's funny that one thing that I keep hearing over and over again as we do these interviews is kind of like the luck based nature of this type of industry that we find ourselves, because being a hobbyist is easy, but being someone who gets paid to do this is a pipe dream for a lot of people.
It really is. And it, I've been someone who's followed the industry and the hobby from like the sidelines pretty much since I started connecting internet and role playing, like in the late 90s. I was like, oh, what's going on? Is Dungeons and Dragons, do they have a website? And, either lurking on forums or just like following who the developers were and like what they'd done before. And I'd always known that this was a passion, like for people with a passion for it, that there were very few people who were raking it in. And when we were able to go full time, it like threw things into sharp perspective, because we'd be at conventions with, indie game designers who are struggling to get a name out for, their games that they're designing, and they desperately want people to play them and get excited about them and buy their books. And like, I'm like, guys, like, what can we do to help? Just because I knew that we were in a unique position, given that I guess I honestly don't know why people like us. I see us as basically saying like just some common sense sort of, this seems obvious kind of stuff, but I'm assured that that's not always the case. I trust other people on this rather than myself.
I've got to say that a big part of your appeal, at least for me, is your Photoshop game that you have for
Oh,
your
yeah.
icons. The most recent one, as a big Fleetwood Mac fan, the fact that you and Pruitt are the cover of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, just I was like, oh man, that's that.
Yeah.
I'm throwing that in there. I mean,
Yeah,
how does it feel, by the way, to be in Fleetwood Mac? That's got to be a great achievement.
I mean, you know, it's a good honor, I guess. And I suppose that, you know, if I think about it, I like it, but, you know, it pales in comparison to being a DM. So, you know.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of your of the channel itself,
Yeah.
when you guys were first starting out with that, was there like a tipping point when you're like, wow, we're really onto something, and you know, we're building our viewer base?
Yeah, we so our first year that we did it, gosh, it took us more than a year actually to get to 10,000. And that sort of first stretch to hitting 10,000 followers was a big milestone for me, mostly because it's like, all right, it's sort of your first kind of woohoo, big deal kind of moment. We were invited to the YouTube studios in Austin. There's like a Google headquarters there or something, had a sort of like a free for use YouTube studio for everybody who was above a certain follower count or something. And they invited us out the same day that we'd hit the benchmark, and we got to film in the same studio where Robert Rodriguez films his El Rey luchador TV show. So there's like all of these like pro wrestling sets with like these giant like Olmec and Aztec heads as you know, props around, and then like a chest full of bloody body parts from Death Proof, I think.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, we shot lycanthropes there and had a lot of fun with the props.
I can't even imagine.
And like that was the year that we did that, and then a few months later we went to PAX South. And for me, PAX South in 2017 was like a huge oh my god moment, because we just like we couldn't walk 10 feet without somebody wanting to talk to us, wanting to say hi. I'm a very kind of introverted person. I don't usually do well with big crowds. I mostly want to just sit somewhere and be quiet. And so it was a little like shocking to me, but it also was like, these are real people on the other end of that computer. Like, I'm not just talking into the void, you know? And a lot of times it can feel that way because it's just the four of us now that my wife and partner joined the business. And it's, yeah, it's good. That's when the turning point for me was like actually meeting people who enjoy and who could look you in the eye and say, watching this video when you said this, like completely changed my game for the better. I'm like, that was just a throwaway comment. Like, I'm really glad it helped. It was, those are really powerful moments for me.
I can imagine. I mean, as someone who's received all of 2 emails that are fan mail, it really is. It's a really cool kind of feeling to be like, oh wow, someone listens to us. We're not just doing this for my mom. You know?
Yeah, right. Well, so my dad is a Southern Baptist preacher, which is not as bad as it sounds, and I was always. I had a frame of reference, you know, every Sunday I'd watch him preach for 200 to 300 people. And like, we grew up in a small town. And so it was one of those, everybody knew me as the preacher's kid. Everybody knew the preacher. And so like, it was when I started looking at numbers and I was like, that's like an order of magnitude bigger than our, you know, the biggest Easter Sunday I can imagine, you know, like, and I remember telling my dad that I was like, Dad, we've got, you know, several thousand people a week, if not more, you know, watching. And he, you know, that's when the numbers start becoming more than just, you know, digits on a screen. It's sort of like, yeah, hopefully those are people who are getting something useful and good and lights their imagination on fire and helps them have a great game.
So integers of churchgoers is an important view. Like,
yes,
kind of
that's how. Yeah,
right.
that's how that's my frame of reference. How many of these churchgoers could be secret D&D players? Let's convert them.
Oh, that's perfect. And actually, that brings me to one of my questions. How, like, you're Texas based, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I have to ask, what do you think being Texas based really brings to, and Southern to, you know, in a certain spec? what does that bring to world building that is particularly unique to the spectrum, right? Because like we're New Englanders, so we
Sure.
get the gray, dreary cold. That's a common thing.
Oh, I live in Vermont now. I grew up in Texas, but I live in
kidding.
Vermont now. But so I've a bit of both worlds there. And I would say for me in Central Texas, it's like, that moment when you're baking something and you've preheated the oven and
Yes.
you pull the oven down and it's just a blast of hot air and it fogs your glasses up and all that. That's like every time you go outside in the summer where I grew up. It's like literally such a temperature difference between inside and outside. It's like winter right now. And you treat it a lot of the same way. It's like the outside is hostile. we're not going to go outside, except for me. I liked exercising and walking in like at 3 PM when it's the hottest, just because I really like to sweat. It's sort of it lets me know that I'm alive kind of thing. It's like if this wasn't a pleasant neighborhood I was walking through, this would be a life or death situation, is usually how I like to think about it. And that's usually when I do my best DM prep as well, as sort of walks in extreme weather. But that's just a tangent. I think what I would bring is a sense of the environment being like it's more hostile there than in New England. New England has the cycles and the seasons there. There's wait a little bit and it'll change kind of attitude. The summers here are amazing. I've never seen this much green. There's nothing like that in Central Texas. It is 365 days a year, 24/7. Just everything out there's trying to kill you. It's scorpions, spiders, poisonous snakes, stinging nettles and spines. Everything is sharp, dry, crispy. It's just a place where you're kind of everything's a little ornery and just a little prickly. And I think I'd bring that, the impact of the environment on the people and animals that live there is certainly an aspect of world building I like incorporating. So I'll take that.
Yeah, I've been to Texas and Arizona like once or twice in my life, but walking through, I have. Walking through the heat did kind of make you think of it just like, oh, I can see the wavy lines out in the distance. I feel like I'm trudging through. It makes what I'm doing feel epic, even though I'm just walking down the street. Yeah,
it's that moment you can feel your skin crisping. Is the moment that I'm looking for. In the desert, I'm always drawn to desert settings as a result. I love dark sun. I love my own homebrew setting is largely desert, and so
that's the land between two rivers. Is that right?
Yeah, land between two rivers.
Mesopotamia.
It's taken from Mesopotamia, but and certainly inspired by Bronze Age Mesopotamia.
Yeah, like speaking of world building tips, especially since you've been DMing forever, and I was listening to the creating a campaign video that you had talked about, and you talked about NPC relationships and how you kind of set the stage before you think about how the adventure is going to be devised. Do you have tips for creatives who maybe they're not role playing, but stuff you've learned in DMing for so long that could apply to them when they're building their worlds?
Yeah, so I like to have a mix of familiar and surprise. So I don't have like a rubric or anything for sort of what I include. It's more of a feel. As part of my campaign prep, I will read a lot of genre fiction for whatever I'm trying to get into, try to watch something or especially if there's a visual element to it, it's very powerful. So I use a lot of Pinterest boards in my DM prep. And if I had the patience, would actually use them in game as like, roll on this encounter table and tell me what you get. And it's like 20 pictures or something, as a way to like evoke feeling. So I'm looking for elements that are going to drive action. In this case, they're going to react or provoke action from the players. But if it was like not necessarily a role-playing situation, they would be the prime movers of the story or a secondary movers or something. And I want something that's going to fill that double role of iconic for the genre and tone I'm going for, but with something that is not obvious. something that's new, that's a fresh take. So if I'm going with like a power hungry wizard, or something like that, then I might put, the old me might have put it like sympathetic motivations, but I now feel that's a little played out in some ways, like the villain who's sympathetic. So it might be that the nature of the power that they are pursuing isn't the usual Cthulhuid abomination or hellish, infernal power, but it's something else. Like it's maybe a force for good that's being twisted and used for nefarious purposes or something, or someone who's being tricked into aiding this wizard or power seeker. I don't know, just any way I can mix and mash things, because for me it's like fantasy has never stopped capturing my imagination, but parts of it have, and the Tolkien-esque standard Ren Fair fantasy just it doesn't cut it for me in terms of like wanting to engage with it. And so I'm always trying to think of ways to make the old new again, or reimagine it so that it's fresh without without having to do a lot of work on my end with like making new monsters and stat blocks and all that stuff.
So you'd say like add a twist, basically.
Yeah. But to me, it's a twist in a very specific kind of direction. It's it's not necessarily just any old random thing. It's like taking whatever is least resonating with me about the archetype and digging deep into both what that component is, like what's going on with it, why don't I like it, what do I wish it accomplished, and like I wish I could say it was something more than just a lot of sitting and thinking, but it is a lot of sitting and thinking. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest like toolkits that a DM can have is like learning how to reskin certain things and learning how to repurpose certain things to make them just more fitting or more interesting. I mean, certain things you can just make so much more evocative either by filing the numbers off just a little bit or calling it something else. From my own example, I remember one of the most terrifying villains that I've ever had my PC's face before was just a bugbear. And because I called it the Beast and I described it in kind of these certain ways, like they had no idea that it was this kind of, it was just, like a CR2 monster that had some class levels and whatnot, and just reskinning it just a little bit to make it more flavorful and make it seem like unknown and scarier is just so much more interesting.
I have a rule for myself, and I try very hard not to call monsters by their monster manual name. Like, I don't call nobody refers to you as come here fighter, like it's, they're not goblins, they're little snots, or they're hinderlings or something like that. Or it's not a manticore, it's a crowned beast or a man tiger or something like that. I really like digging into the origins of monster names, and like going back and finding through, like, say, the 19th century anthropologists and sociologists who were recording folk tales, to like linguists who go further back. And like you mentioned bugbear means sort of like someone who jumps out and scares you, and it refers to in Old English like a scarecrow, basically. And you'll see if you go like further back in D&D's history, you'll find like illustrations of bugbears with like pumpkin heads. And they're not these shaggy sort of orangutan big goblins that we have now. They look more like just creepy fairies with menacing pumpkins and big spiky weapons that are going to come club you to death. And just like, that's the kind of reimagining that I like. Like, I would present maybe not bugbears, but bugaboos to to a group. No stat change at all, just keep them as is. But, just a little change like that can really unnerve veteran players.
Oh, absolutely.
I like the saying that's reimagining. That's a really great word to use.
Yeah, you were kind of hinting at, I mean, you were, like the history of, folklores and monsters. And if I'm not mistaken, you have like, that was your kind of academic path when you went through college and whatnot. Is that right?
Yeah. I have a master's degree in history, military history specifically. And it was getting that was like, I don't want to go any further, please. Like, it was, especially not when I was looking at people who had sort of graduated a few years ahead of me and the sort of jobs they were getting. I was like, that seems like a lot of work for not enough of a living wage. So I jumped off at a terminal master's degree, and but ended up writing my thesis over the transition from aristocratic knights as the mounted warriors of battlefield to like professional mounted soldiers, and like how it goes from this warrior who's very much individual focused, their honor, their glory, that kind of thing, to someone who's got to like ride knee to knee with the riders next to them and not get out of line, not break ranks, face down musket fire, and yet still be a force on the battlefield. So it ended up, I will tie this back to D&D, I promise. It ended up reading a lot of personal accounts of people who were soldiers at the time. One of the curious things about the printing press is that there's like this explosion of how-to books in the 15 and 1600s. And so you can go back and read like how to cook, how to train a dog, how to train a horse, how to arrange flowers. And there's basically like how to do war books, which are a bunch of English soldiers of fortune and mercenaries fighting for foreign countries, writing about their experiences. And they will write about the exploits on the battlefield, and they're always dressed in colorful like peacock feather cloaks or great big plumed helmets. They really want to be seen. They don't want to fade into the background. They want everybody to know, this is me. I'm out front. I'm in the breach. I took the cannons, that sort of thing. And to me, it just had D&D all over it. And I've never not been inspired when I go digging through history, regardless of time or place, and like come away with a bunch of D&D adventure ideas, just because it's the best source book we've got.
I really couldn't agree any more with that, as someone who tries to bring in as much history as possible. Because, I mean, if you want to talk about reskinning, I mean, why not do that with historical events as well? Or, it's just such, I mean, history provides so many plot hooks on its own, right?
Oh yeah.
Why not just steal one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of them are like, they can frame sort of your entire campaign. And not to mention the fact that they're figures of history who are probably, they're like the model of a D&D character. I look at someone like, say, Alexander the Great, and it's like, even if half the things written about him are true, this guy has a player character written all over him. Like, trained by the philosopher of his time, conquers more than half the known world. Like, no, it's outrageous. It's ridiculous.
I'm pretty sure that Tamirith of Scythia was a character that I've played at one point as well.
Oh yes.
She's just such a badass. Like, awesome. How is she not a 20th level fighter back in that day? Like,
right.
Come on.
Right. Yeah. Bronze Age and sort of like classical history to me has always resonated more as D&D-esque than medieval history. And so I always like looking to it for inspiration. It's one of my favorites.
I think it's because there's a lot more space in between us and the Bronze Age, so it feels a little bit more fantastical and a little bit more what's alien, like something that feels more fantastical overall.
Yeah, it's called Scythia, not Ukraine.
Right. Also, do you want to fight over Scythia, or do you not have the time for that right now?
Can we fight over Macedonia or Macedonia as well? Like
I'll go hard C on that. I'll go Macedonia. Absolutely.
Excuse me. I usually like to do the hard C just because it's a further sort of separation. But I mix it up a lot too.
Same like with Genghis Khan. When I found out that it was pronounced Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan, I was like, oh, come on. But Genghis sounds a little bit cooler, right?
Right.
Yeah, but now it's like, I kind of want to be more historically accurate.
Sure. It's history is one of those things where I had a professor tell me, he's like, history is like you're all gardeners, and you are arguing to the death about the color of the wings on the beetle outside. Like, it's just these minutia become so important. Did the Greeks hold their spears overhanded or underhanded when they fought in a phalanx? friendships have been ruined over that question.
Yeah, and another favorite quote of mine, which I'm going to butcher, so excuse me, is I believe it is ancient history. Like, hold, I'm just gonna fuck it up again. Hold on,
that's all right.
I believe it's something along the lines of ancient history is almost certainly false, but we must believe it to be true.
Oh yeah,
because it's all we have.
It's all you have. Yeah, there's so little that survives that to know anything is a miracle. And especially once you start reading how it survived, it's like, oh yeah, a monk needed some new paper and just like put some white out on this, and then we scraped it off, and now we know what it says underneath. It's like, jeez. Yeah.
Commodification of like knowledge and history was not really a thing back then, because it was a matter of like, we need to not die today.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And so it makes the past, to me, the past is a wonderful playground in that way. And I know some people worry about like, because you are dealing with real world cultures, real world religions, like how much of that to play around with and how much of that to respect and not incorporate. And like, I kind of go back and forth, but I think as long as you're doing it from a place of respect and humility, then like, even if you mess up, even if you do something that's like, maybe we don't want to role play out historical religious conflicts or something like that, but it kind of like, I don't know, just happened. We were in the moment. I don't know. That, you can at least walk it back and apologize or whatever, it's, when I think about historical role playing and how much of it I want to do versus how much of it I've been able to convince people to do, most of it's been like well, I don't know that much about it, or I don't want to, do something like that would be either they would find offensive or that would offend someone else. And it's like, come on, we can have a nice time playing in the past and in being inspired by it and like exploring these little question marks that we have, without like, I don't know, without being offensive. So I don't know. That's, I guess that's my nutshell thoughts on historical role playing.
Excellent. Daniel, you had a question?
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to interrupt the awesome nerding out on the history here, but it's just kind of a segue since you mentioned like players and involving them in particular kinds of role play. Mm-hmm. So you had an episode about kind of the golden rule and social contracts, with your players.
Yeah.
So I had a question in the sense that, okay, well, we've got social contract in terms of how we're going to interact with each other as players. What about when it comes to creating the world, so the collaborative act of like world building? What kind of rules do you have with your players and how much they contribute to the world versus how much you're setting up for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's so group dependent. I don't really have any hard and fast like always this way or always the other. I try to leave the door open for as much as the players want to engage with. And I've got some people I play with who are very much, they will take the reins and go in a lot of ways that are very helpful. And then others that, you can tell they're either new to it or just don't want to, they don't want that authority. Part of the appeal of it is like playing from this very much like character centered moment, and to say like, I'm going to, dictate something or establish something about the game world is just not why they're here. And so I find it's usually a session 0 thing. I will float it out at some point of that. I like to, leave the door open and sort of like express support for collaborative world building. The types of settings that I create have lots of blank spaces in them, so that I purposefully, I want people to come in and be like, I don't want to have to fill out all these places. Like, it would be fun for someone else to kind of contribute. But I understand if I'm playing a traditional RPG that the expectation is the DM is going to do the bulk of that, and that the contributions the players will make either won't be significant, which I don't necessarily agree with, or can't like alter the quote unquote story, which is another a term I don't usually use in my own campaigns. So an example of that would be, I might ask in a questionnaire before before plays begin. Excuse me, I'm all tongue tied. I'll ask in a questionnaire before play begins, something about their character. What what do they know about, the world that they live in? How long have they lived in the location that they, that we're going to start the game in? And then I'll usually ask a question like, what do they know that no one else knows? And in parentheses, I'll put including me, the DM, right? Like, tell me something about my world that I don't even know. And that's like a little piece that the player's going to bring that's a part of their character. And I will start using those to like fill in blank spots in my NPCs, my villains, my stuff I got going on. And I found that's a really useful tool for, getting players in there. And then if they don't care, they just write a stupid, meaningless secret, so it's an opportunity, and they can take it or leave it as they like. So
I love that.
Yeah.
So on your channel, you seem to focus a lot on 5th edition, and I believe it's either out or coming out soon. It's like Ancient Arcana.
Yeah.
Unearthed Arcana.
Yeah, Arcana of the Ancients.
No, I thought it was Arcana of the Ancients. That was
Monty Cook Games supplement.
Yeah. Now, I've also seen before where you say like, oh, in a way, every setting is kind of post-apocalyptic, but do you find that 5th edition lends itself better to being set in a science fantasy kind of world than others? Because I always find that world very hard to find a system that's good for it.
Yeah. To me, Numenera was sort of the first that came along and was like, had this seamless quality to it that could straddle that genre divide. And I find that like 5th edition has a similar vagueness to it that you can, in the act of play sort of nail down exactly like, well, okay, how exactly does this power work? It's in some ways 5th edition is a lot like 4th edition in that you have these powers that you have and they sort of work, and you're given a little bit of the flavor of them, the lore of them, but it's really just the mechanics. And then you're heavily encouraged to kind of reskin your powers and present them as a part of your character. And I think that can be a really powerful world building tool, because you could say, yeah, your character thinks it's magic and the spell slot is just an abstraction. It's a game mechanic. It has no correlation in the real world. It's a way to measure out power through the game. But what you're really doing is accessing, a cloud of nanites that the ancients put into the air, eons ago. And, through an accident of birth, you've got the ability to, interface with them. And now you need to learn the codes. And then it just produces the spell effect basically. And that reskinning of how and why powers work is a space that both players and dungeon masters or world builders can like really dig deep and define the parameters of their world. Like, is this a place where the laws of nature as we understand them in our world, do they apply? And then everything fantastical is like outside of that, and there's consequences for breaking the natural laws of the world? Or is it a place like, say, Jeremy Crawford and the rest of the D&D team talk about, where Dungeons and Dragons worlds have an inherent magic in them, almost like the Force, right? It flows through everything, and spells are just one manifestation of that. And those are the kinds of questions where I'll spend hours just working through the implications for it. It's like, what does that mean for XP? Does that mean that everyone who has more than one hit dice is channeling magic somehow? Just all of these questions that'll come out of just how you conceive of the basic underlying metaphysics and structure of your world. And I like to use those sorts of secrets, that kind of deep world building, the foundations of this fictional place that we're going to make alive, we're going to make it come to life during play, are really great for like seeding as sort of villainous plots or locations that something of epic importance is going to happen. And so like just putting a little bit of thought into them, so if the players scratch the surface, there's something there, is really great. It's really satisfying.
Big shout out to Monty Cook Games and Numenera and
yes,
the Cypher system in general, which I'm currently running a game in right now, and it is phenomenal. It really is. And as someone who's not a fan of post-apocalyptic content, I do love Numenera, which is not only one post-apocalypse, but at least 9.
At least 9.
So I think that makes up for my otherwise disdain for post-apocalyptic settings.
Sure. Well, and their post-apocalypse is hopeful, and it's kind of like what I wanted to do with Land Between Two Rivers. At least in my original conception of it was, it's post-apocalypse, but we're here to build something new, not like roll around in the ashes of what was, and a lot of reasons why I went with no humans, no dwarves, no elves, because it's like none of this is theirs. What I love about Numenera and the Ninth World is like humanity's returned, but they're like biologically 20th century humans for the most part. And so it's like, where did they go? Why did they return? What happened? All of the changes that have make it's like a familiar world, but it's also alien. And that's a kind of apocalypse that like I don't see a lot of. We get a lot of the Mad Max, the Walking Dead, the environmental disaster type apocalypses, but not, these people could just reshape the planet at their whim, the solar system at their whim, and now they're just gone, and they left their stuff behind. I enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, actually, considering that you just brought up Land Between Two Rivers again, I do want to talk a little bit about your setting.
Oh, sure.
And you're currently running a game on Twitch, The Poisoned Sea. Is that right?
It is on hiatus just because life got a bit too much for the time that we could all play D&D. There's a weird part about playing a game on stream where you turn your game into a TV show. And the pressures of just like meeting that every week meant we had to put it on hiatus, but I really hope to return to it because I loved it. It was great.
As a fan of aquatic settings, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Now I have a question. Were you at all inspired by Razor Coast, which is a Nicholas Logue? I think it's Nicholas Logue setting,
No.
which I kickstarted many years ago and is fantastic.
I have not. I'm familiar with the name. But I was mostly inspired by the Cerulean Seas supplements for Pathfinder. Aldea Press, I think, is them, but I could be wrong on that. And this is where when it comes to podcasting, I never remember anybody's name. I was inspired by that. Open Design, the sort of the precursor to Kobold Press, also had Sunken Empires, which I really liked and drew a lot of inspiration from like Atlantis and Mu and Lemuria for some of the ruins that would be scattered throughout the Poison Sea. Most of it was just sort of extrapolating from events that had happened at Land Between Two Rivers, things that was just like bubbling around my brain. I had this idea of like 6 wizards as being sort of the founding gods of a new group of people that they, a wizard did it taken to its most absurd conclusion. Everything around here is a wizard did it. And it being a place where for them, this is not the apocalypse. This is Eden. They have everything they need to live in the poisoned waters. The pollution here is nourishing to them. The magical radiation doesn't harm them. And whereas like the Drylanders, they come here and they leave with tentacles and gills and all sorts of grotesque mutations, the merfolk of these vivomancers, these bio-sorcerers, they're meant to be here. This is their home. And I wanted to try that and explore that with the apocalypse. And this is going to get, hopefully this doesn't get too deep, but like when I think about, say, climate change and my son, who's 3 now, and the world he's going to live in later, I think of like, there's a sense in which he's not going to really know any different. So there's not going to be like this sense of like, oh, well, yeah, I don't remember when it used to have like catastrophic flooding every year or like violent tornadoes and hurricanes and extreme weather events or all these kinds of things that they predict. So it'll just be normal to him. And I kind of wanted to create a part of that setting where for these people, this is not the apocalypse. The world is not dying. This is just how things are. And, they're fine with it.
That is certainly one way to look at climate change and the world around you. I mean,
Yeah.
Honestly, I've never thought about it that way, but damn, that's pretty deep, Jim Davis.
I try to do a lot of thinking about these things, maybe too much, but yeah, and
Take a lot of long walks in Vermont.
yes,
the perspective of history. I think that's where that's coming from.
yeah, it's that French deep history perspective. Yeah, no, a lot of ways, Land Between Two Rivers is my personal just working out the fact that climate change is real, and I'm going to have to live through part of it. Like, it's a place where everyone who ever lived on it has ruined this world. They've left it a dry desert, devoid of life, and then most of them just left, because they're all high level wizards and opened up gates and hopped on dimensional spaceships and whatever other kind of weird Saturday morning cartoon idea cropped up during play, And it's the kobolds that are left, the goblins, the ogres, and all of those who, have just been slaughtered and pushed to the margins and labeled as villainous and evil. Who are like, well, now there's no more humans around. We can finally have our own, run of the place. But they left it a mess. And there's something deeply personal going on. Surprise, surprise. But I'm just glad others enjoy experiencing it and playing in it. Mostly that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Actually, we're going to go to our ad break from BP right now.
Sure, yeah, why not?
No,
I love Gulf shrimp, by the way.
Mutant shrimp, yeah.
No, but I actually, when you talk about it that way, it actually sounds a little bit like The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that story or not, but a lot of it comes with. Yeah. In a similar way, a lot of it comes from him having really deep conversations with his son and what it means to essentially have children and what it's like to live in a future that is completely alien to what you know and knew at one point.
Yeah. It's
it reminds me a lot of.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. It reminds me a lot of Wind Up Girl. If anyone's read that, it's kind of weird to see that now, even though things aren't great, people view this as the golden age, and like 50 years from now, people might look back at just like, oh yeah, that's where someone could travel the world. You're never going to do that. You're never going to leave this village.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. I think about that. When we moved, when I moved from Texas to Vermont, I fly back to film, and I'm fortunate enough that the YouTube channel and Patreon is able to afford that. But I've flown more in the last few years than I have in my entire life. And I know that every time I get on one of those planes, I'm like, there's going to be a time when I probably won't be able to do this. Or I hope not, at least. And yeah, it kind of puts things in perspective. And it's those sorts of thoughts that I let percolate and will eventually become adventures. And so I find that to kind of bring it back to RPGs and whatnot, but that, whatever's going on in my life, whatever I'm interested in, whatever I'm reading in other sources, like that, it ends up in the game somehow. And like one of the most important things I started doing as a DM was just like making sure that I curated and didn't put too much of one idea into my head, that so that my games wouldn't become, say, too grimdark or too silly or too anything, because so much about role playing and dungeon mastering was performative and a reflection of who I was, that you kind of have to be a well-rounded, I don't know, it does you good to be a well-rounded person to DM, because there's so much you got to do, you never know what's going to be useful or engaging for your friends or people playing. And yeah.
Could not agree more. Yeah. It's important to be a well-rounded individual between all the wrangling and feelings and rules. And
Oh yeah, especially like the way that it seems as though the play style's turned and is much more emotive, much more engaged with that connection to your character. I come from a style of play that's like, bring 2 or 3 characters. You're going to need them. And, I don't get attached to my characters until they've survived for a while. And so it's one of those things that I notice in playing with people, that like coming to the table with like a pre-attached, like I already love this character. whether it's because they made them 6 months ago and now they're finally getting a chance to play, or, you know, they've read about D&D and this is their first time. Like, having to adjust how I approach the game and the advice I give has been a satisfying challenge, because I find that when I was growing up, it was not an emotional, like, I mean, you get emotional if like something bad happened, and there were the occasionally shouting matches, but it wasn't.
Oh,
like,
that's never happened.
Oh yeah, what are you talking about? Nerds arguing in a way that's unhealthy.
That door was shut, Rob.
Right.
And we weren't on that bridge, Chris.
On a lighter-hearted note, though, on your channel, at one point you spoke about eating monsters, and which is something I have never seen people do, and was actually weirded out. Like, I've seen cannibalism more than I've seen someone want to butcher like a bugbear or some weird creature and be like, "Oh, we're gonna make some rations out of this." And I guess my question is, I know you answered one half of this on the channel, but what would be your least favorite thing to be forced to eat, or your favorite thing to try?
Ooh. So, I mean, like, I think that troll flesh would be really bad to eat, because I think it just like end up forming a solid block of flesh in your stomach.
Oh,
You know,
Cartilage and bone too. Absolutely.
yeah, all that's and but I mean, you know, there's some other, like, I bet that any of the oozes would be terrible to eat. Like, being corroded from the inside out, it's probably not a good experience. But if you could deal with that acidity, you know, maybe, you know, it's cooking, right? Like, you're balancing sweet, salty, acid, all the other flavors. I bet you could. The alchemy can do wonders for a gelatinous cube, Jello mold. And but
here in the name,
yeah, right. I think I would want to eat. All right, so here's off the top of my head, I want to know if wyvern tastes like chicken, because I see them as very big birds. I want to know if you know, if something like it's the four-armed sort of like, or the behir, right? The sort of like, it looks like a basilisk, but it's kind of a dragon, kind of, you know, does it?
Oh, the purple one that shoots lightning and has like 8 legs.
Yeah, these 8-legged lizards. You know, does it, you know, if you eat that, does it like make your hair stand up on end? Those are the kind of things.
Some mind flayer sushi.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Some head calamari from mind flayers. Yeah. If offered unicorn, I probably wouldn't eat it, but I bet it tastes good. You know,
Not only would it taste good, there's a 90% chance that you will look prettier after eating it.
Oh, I might not refuse then. You know.
All right, Jim Davis. From here, we're going to go ahead and pivot into our world building jam session.
Sounds good.
And to kind of break this down, we're going to start off. We're going to create something collaboratively together.
All right.
We're going to start off by figuring out the genre, which can be science fiction, fantasy, horror, modern day, romance, or we roll twice and combine the two. And then we're going to go ahead and add the subject, which could be an item, a monster, a place, a historical figure, an event, or again, we roll twice and combine the two. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a theme, or we're going to focus on a theme, which is madness, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, the unspeakable, triumph, or hope. Then once we're done with that, we're going to build whatever we have. And then about halfway through, we're going to add a twist, which I'm not going to reveal any of. And we will start there. So we're going to roll some dice and figure out what we got here. So this is going to be for the genre.
All right.
First off, I have romance, which I'm very excited
very
for.
Good. Very good.
We have a subject, which is going to be a monster.
Oh, yes.
And finally, we have the theme, which is madness.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a romance setting with a monster and a theme of madness. Jim Davis, as the guest of honor, you get to start us off. So go right ahead.
All right. So off the top of my head, the monster is being pursued by commoners, right, people who you don't want around. Maybe it's a monster that has like a dangerous aura or something, like a fire aura or a poison aura or something, and a curse of attraction has been placed on it, such that these villagers are like deeply, madly in love and want to bring it gifts and like just spend time with it. It's not sexual. It's like they just need to be around it and like, I need you in my life, Medusa. Or something great like Gorgon or whatever. And so there's a rash of this monsters fleeing across the countryside. But everywhere they go, they leave this trail of both heartbroken individuals longing for a connection to the cost of, physical injury, the loss of life that comes from their maddening devotion. And like maybe as the story progresses, the madness gets more and more like possessive and creepy, and like it's a monster cult, but the monster is like powerless within it, captive by the mass of creature, of people that are amassed around it. That's where I'm thinking.
That is beautiful and tragic, especially from the monster's perspective. It is essentially the head of a cult that it wants nothing to do with.
Yeah.
It like flips it on its head. I love that it's the monster's not the villain in this case at all.
No, it's like it's one of those monsters that wants to be left alone. That maybe it's someone who is cursed, to be a monster, and like the curse also, instead of people being repulsed, it's like you're repulsive, but others are attracted to you, so you hate yourself. But others, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too much self-mirror kind of reflection thing. Anyway,
you could all sympathize with that creature.
You could, yeah. But at the same time, it's like something needs to be done. So I like that scenario, I guess, because it compels action, but it's not necessarily violence. And I like leaving the door open for non-violent, action-oriented solutions, just because. But yeah, that's sort of where my thoughts are.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And what else can we do to kind of expand? I feel like that's such a like baked in idea that like, what is there any way that we can expand on that, or we won't go straight to the twist?
Well, I mean, there's like a third prong, right? Like the adventurers have to either, whoever the protagonist here is, has to both deal with these commoners who aren't necessarily to blame, and also save the creatures so they can save the commoners. So they've got like there's a third leg to the situation.
Yeah.
I also love the idea that like you're, as an adventurer, you're probably coming across like the aftermath of all of this, right? Like you're watching young maidens who are so heartbroken by the leaving of their master that they are throwing themselves off of bridges and they're causing great self-harm. And so you're like, oh, there's got to be some kind of awful thing that's happening.
Yeah.
I was going to say
Ito situation.
Yeah. What's that?
I was going to say that another thing that the cult or the following of this can be doing is it's pushing people away because it doesn't want to share its lover, but it's a double action thing at the fact that it's also preventing more people from coming under the spell. So the violent acts that they're doing of pushing people away and making sure that no one sees their lover is actually beneficial, but it's something that someone's trying to stop. Like, oh, they're probably holding that poor whatever it is hostage. Like maybe the adventurers, or maybe no one knows what it actually looks like, and it's even weirder when they eventually reveal it or see it. It's just like, oh, what the, oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I can even imagine it being like just a nobleman, or like who's just a dark brooding Mr. Darcy type, and he's got his hand against the wall, as he's backlit by the fireplace, bringing back to romance, obviously. And like you're kind of like, oh, what is his deal? And then I imagine that it has to be a trigger of some kind that this enraptured madness kind of takes hold, right? Like I think I like it more as a curse, like you were saying, Jim, where there's something that happens where anyone that he falls in love with, or anyone who, something like that, there's got to be a trigger point to it where that is what triggers the infatuation.
Yeah.
The nobleman blind his guards so that they can't view the monster, and he's keeping it away from everyone.
Oh, so he's imprisoned himself to keep everyone safe.
Ooh.
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I like that.
Cool.
There's so much room for like half truths and misinformation, and this is almost a kind of scenario where you don't need to fill in a ton of details, because like the players will immediately start speculating and handing you little nuggets to fill out the narrative there. But I like it. There's a lot of ways it could go as well. Yeah.
Is it okay to kill it? I don't know if I can kill this and it'd be a good thing.
Yeah,
This
who
is the
knows?
question.
Maybe
All
it's
right,
like
I
a
feel like-
celestial or something like that, even if you're going with the monster. Like,
Ooh, that's cool.
I love finding ways to use celestials as antagonists, if not, villains. But,
They always feel ancillary, like they're never going to be used, because like whenever you're going to fight an Archon, like come on, guys.
Right, you can't even summon them. Like they're so you gotta get gate before you can even summon them. Anyway.
All right, so I feel like we've got such a solid concept. We're going to go ahead and just fuck it up by throwing in a twist.
Let's do it.
I'm going to roll our D20. I'm not going to mention all of these because that's just too much. Let's see what we got going. So, on second thought, make it a happy ending. So we now have to take a building.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
And now we have to go ahead and make a happy ending out of it
okay.
somehow.
Expectations
So the
subverted.
curse is the result of the monster not being with their true love. Right. So the adventure then becomes about discovering it, finding the true love, and then reuniting them.
Yes.
Through
that's perfect.
through
Oh my
the,
God.
the possessive madness.
Mic drop. I mean,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
That's how I do it.
We can't do
We
better.
can't add to
than
that. Yeah. Oh my God, we got it.
That's and
Yeah.
scene.
I want to play that game right
Yeah,
now.
that sounds
you know?
fun.
Right?
Let's do it. Some
Yeah.
Monster Hearts
Yeah.
next week.
Yes.
Oh man, no, that's excellent, Jim. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, so that's gonna conclude our World Build Jam. Jim, thank you very much for that. And now I'm gonna go ahead and roll right into some rapid fire questions.
Cool.
Jim, my wife wants to know: is cereal a soup?
Oh, I think it's a cold soup. But nothing's emulsified in it, right? Like, what else would then if it's not a soup, then milk is the condiment to a grain
Oh,
Yeah,
thing?
A grain salad.
A grain salad.
Grain
It's
salad.
a cold grain salad. Yeah, I like that
with
answer.
a milk dressing.
With a milk dressing. Yeah.
it's a milk lasagna.
I hate something and I have
Everyone-
such strong.
I have a question for your wife. Is an open-faced sandwich a sandwich?
Ooh, controversy.
Yeah.
She works for a food magazine. I will ask her.
Oh,
She's
I'm
probably
curious.
insulted by the question.
All right, Jim. Second question: what RPGs have you been playing recently?
Ooh, I have been playing original D&D. That is 1974 Little Brown Books D&D.
Spicy.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's one of my favorites. And what else? I've been reading up on some 5th edition, but not playing any right now. And gosh, I'm in a slump now that I think about it. Oh well, I hope to be playing more soon.
Of course. And another real quick question: who do you want to plug? Who's not you?
Ooh, oh wow.
You can always say us. I mean, that's.
I mean, yeah, okay. Okay, so all right. So if y'all are y'all familiar with Dale Kingsmill's YouTube channel?
No, not at all.
She does all kinds of stuff. It's not just D&D, but she's got a lot of like practical D&D tip type shows. But she also has a lot of shows where she like does these deep dives into fairy tales and folklore and sort of just like investigating like where does thieves' cant come from? Like where does and going back to say like the historical roots of hobo signs and code words amongst smugglers and things like that. And so I find her channel, it's on YouTube, Dale Kingsmill, Dael Kingsmill is, or Monarch's Factory, sorry, is what the name of the YouTube channel is. Kingsmill is her name. Yeah, it's just a great channel to be inspired by.
That's excellent. And Chris or Daniel, do either of you have any other questions for Jim Davis?
Chris, after you.
I mean, I really just had that one about the food is what I'm always fascinated by. But
All right.
Actually, no. One last question. Being a Texas expat, I have a question. Do a lot of people there play Deadlands, or is it really just hated?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen anyone play. I know people must, so I don't know. I'm curious as well. Is there is Texas portrayed particularly nastily in Deadlands or something?
Well,
I mean, it'd
it's
be
kind of
fitting.
like ghost cowboys and
Yeah,
like
zombie cowboys.
ghost cowboys and Indians is really what it's
Yeah.
about. And the people I've seen play like there's a lot of stereotypes that get thrown around.
Yeah, it happens.
But yeah, I was just curious about people who are based in that area, how it's viewed.
I'm not sure that I've ever seen anyone or heard of any games of Deadlands. It's always been one of those I wanted to try because it looks neat, but I'm not sure that I can answer that.
All right. Jim, why don't you go ahead and plug?
I still have one question. I have a rapid fire question for you.
Go ahead.
What was your favorite critical failure or critical success in an RPG that you ever played?
Okay. All right. I think all right. I'll go ahead and say it. So the last time I played D&D, which is like last week, I ended up in the boss fight. This is with a character where after rolling for stats and adjustments, I ended up with 3 18s and a 16. And I have just like whiffed the entire 5 levels of combat that we're in. Just like I'll get 1 hit in and the rest of the combat's a whiff. 6 criticals in that. This was on Roll20 as well, so I don't want to hear any bad mouthing about the RNG on Roll20 after this. Which I have my secret suspicion of, or secret theory on. But yeah, the last time I played, it was just one of those moments where because I've DM'd so often, the die rolling, I didn't get it from a player's perspective until I did a lot more playing, which I've had an opportunity to do recently. And I can see why the players get so amped and excited about it. Because when I'm a DM, it's like, I'm going to roll so many of these dice that's meaningless, and I don't really want to crit on you 6 times in a row because that would sort of suck for all of us. But,
forever DM.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, this is very fun times then.
All right. Jim, why don't you go ahead and plug your show and yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So yeah, we are WebDM over on YouTube, where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and just tabletop RPGs in general, looking to set your imagination alight and help you run a great game for your friends. We have a second YouTube channel, WebDM Plays, which is where a lot of our live streamed shows end up. So if you didn't catch them on Twitch, they are on a second YouTube channel, WebDM Plays. We have a Twitch channel, although right now we don't have a lot of stuff on it. I don't know when, because the date has not been set, but very soon, hopefully before February or March is up, I'll be running some of Sly Flourish's Grindelroot. He looked for a channel who wanted to sort of showcase it, and we're like, yeah, we'll absolutely do that. So we'll be able to showcase some of his adventures and prep style there. And I think, yeah, that's about it. We have a Patreon. If you like this show, then we do a podcast there where it's basically me and Pruitt just running our mouths off. And I think that's about it. We're doing some books and other things that'll come out later this year, but right now I cannot say any more than that. So,
all right. All right. Jim Davis, thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you very much.
My pleasure. Yeah.
And we're back. We really hope you enjoyed our interview with Jim Davis. Gentlemen, what was your favorite thing about the interview? What did you learn from the most?
I learned that you guys are both huge history nerds.
Look, game recognized game. And when we started talking about history, I couldn't help but feel a little...
hearts everywhere.
Yeah, there was a genuine flutter in my heart as I'm talking about like the type of... I love history. I'm not a history major, because various reasons.
I don't know why not. This makes no sense to me.
Yeah, look, I think it makes a lot more sense that I'm an English major, but anyway, that's not important right now. I would agree with that. I think that's probably one of my favorite things to talk about is like, yeah, let's get deep into the history. Absolutely. Chris can't remember anything.
I can remember things.
We were drunk, the whole time. So there's that.
Yeah.
Completely drunk.
High.
And yes.
Daniel, you weren't even here.
I remember that he is no longer living in Texas, and also I still don't know if people in Texas play Deadlands.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a mystery. Hey, if you are listening to this in Texas or are from Texas, let us know how much you love Deadlands, the RPG setting, and whether or not you think it's a fair representation of Deadlands. Is Deadlands, the tabletop RPG, the Boston accent of Texas? It's just nothing but a collection. Yeah, exactly.
Are there actually zombie cowboys in Texas?
Obviously there are, but I mean, come on.
People just don't talk about it.
True.
So Texas listeners, send us an email at Worldbuild with us, or go ahead and send us a Twitter at Let's Worldbuild, and let us know how offensive Deadlands is as an RPG. And until next time, remember that we love you very much, and we hope you have a good week.
Good night.